Can you guys hear us now?
Yeah.
Woo! How are you doing?
Jen, do you want me to start over from a particular place or just pick up from where we were?
The computer is picking up our audio, but the audience didn't keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next item is the roll call.
Calling roll, Bruce Abernethy,
Here?
Joe Crenoweth,
Yes.
Laura Costa Cooper,
Here.
Alan Unger,
Here.
Jim Clinton.
Raise your hand, Jim.
Yeah. Erica Campbell.
Yeah.
Here.
Oh, here. Great. Oh, good.
And Oliver Tatum is not in attendance tonight. Lori Chesley.
Here.
Anne-Marie Hamlin. Here. Alicia Moore. Here. Zach Boone.
Here.
Laura Boney.
I assume we're
Here.
in touch.
Heather Hayes.
Here.
Kathleen Knudsen.
Here.
Dean Rochelle. Here. Charlotte Andreessen. Here. And Jen Kovitz, that ends the roll. Oh, and Mark Reineke.
Here.
That ends the roll.
And I think there's some guests that do we want.
We call roll, I haven't called roll on guests in previously, it's on
Okay. Not a problem.
agenda.
Okay.
I
So-
made the note of them in a minute.
Great, thank you. So the next item, Josh Clausen. You want to come on up and introduce yourself?
Alicia wanted to give it and then Josh.
Super excited to have on board Josh Clausen, who is our new Director of Campus Services. So that's all of our facilities, ground, maintenance, custodial. Snow was a big one today. Josh has been with us all of 3.5 weeks or so, and has already just made tremendous inroads on so many things that we've needed attention to. So I'll let Josh introduce a little bit of his background, and then welcome to ask any questions you might have.
Thank you. Yeah, so I am basically a Bend native, third generation from Bend. I'm a second generation electrician. And went from right into the apprenticeship through COCC. It was all college accredited, went back, got my construction management degree, went to work for the FAA and did project management there, came back, went to work for Deschutes County, Ben Lapine, and then this popped up. And so it's definitely a career advancement for me. I'm very lucky and glad to be here. As of now, my first goals are to really drill down on deferred maintenance and create some ways we can discuss that and really tackle that together. I'm a very straightforward, plain talking individual, and I will give you that information right up front and do with it whatever we can. As far as high level look on what I'm working on right now, the campus has, as you know, an aging electrical infrastructure. And so we're finalizing the design for that, going to plan to be very soon for that. So we can get that going right now. We've got budget for it, so that's going to be coming up. We're working on Pioneer Roof, the roofing project there. We've got HVAC projects all over the place. We've got paint projects. We've got all sorts of stuff. Really, I'm just getting my handle on the process of COCC, figuring out what works best for departments, how I can best serve everybody, and be most useful.
So a lot of those projects Josh has mentioned are going to come back to you too,
Yeah.
because of the dollar threshold. But truly, in 3.5 weeks, it's pretty amazing that what he's been able to tackle and take on and start bringing forward to help advance us, especially and improve our infrastructure. So he's going to be a fantastic addition to college.
Thank you.
Great, well, thank you very much. We're delighted to have you on board.
Thank you.
Are there any agenda changes? I'm not aware of any. Okay. Public comment. Is there anybody that wants to say something to us?
There was no public comment submitted in advance. We do have a guest attending on their Bruce's iPad, but Zoom, any public comment?
Okay, great, thanks. Next item is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of our last meeting. I move that we
approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on to information items. The first one is the financial statements. Any questions or comments? Okay. Next item is new hire reports. Any questions or comments? Or I have one comment. This seems a little bit higher than I am remembering from past years. Am I just remembering incorrectly, or is that accurate?
That it's higher?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have thought this hiring, if it's new people, would have been happened in September rather than October.
Oh, well, typically we would have more faculty and so on hired in the fall, but we do have very active hiring throughout the entire year. Is that what you mean? Like why the numbers are higher?
Whether, my question preface was, this seems higher, so either it is or it isn't, and then whether are we playing catch up in some instances? That's more where it's coming from.
Yeah, sorry. So thank you. So yes, there is some catch up for sure. We've had some positions that have been vacant for a bit, even through COVID. And then we also have on some of those reports that you see, we have what we call a regular wage, which are hourly workers. And we had a number of those that we didn't use during COVID. And so those are coming back quite a lot as well. And you'll see those on those reports.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Next item is a presentation by Alicia on institutional success indicators.
Alrighty, so institutional success indicators. I just want to set the stage a little bit and share some of the background since it's been a while that we've looked at these. Part of this stems out of our strategic planning work at the college. Part of it stems from accreditation and some of our requirements we have there. And ultimately what this is it parallels a timeline in which higher education has really shifted to an environment of assessment and quality improvement. So whether you put on an accreditation hat and say this is about mission fulfillment, you put on our strategic plan hat, or you put on a higher ed hat in general, what our institutional success indicators are really helping us decide is how well are we doing our jobs? How well are we meeting our mission, right? And over the last several years, we have had various groups coming together to help develop our institution's strategic plan and gauge how we're making progress towards that strategic plan. I always like to talk about success indicators and institutional assessment as a carrot and a stick, right? The carrot is, this is the right thing to do. We need to look at ourselves. We need to look and see how we can advance and how we can improve. The stick of that is, even if we don't want to, accreditation tells us we have to, right? And we do have our mid-cycle accreditation visit coming up this spring. And I know Anne Marie will be giving updates as we get closer to that. But just as with that background, I want to set the stage a little bit, right? This is our current mission. Central Oregon Community College promotes student success and community enrichment by providing quality, accessible, lifelong educational opportunities. Now, if I'd done that with my team, I would have done a pop quiz and found a student who could memorize it, share it out. Didn't want to put you on the spot, but I know you know that the key components of our mission really are focused on student success and community enrichment. Right? That's the core of what community colleges are about. How they define each of those is a little bit different. And I'm going to share that with information on how COCC has been doing that with you in just a moment. As we look at this, I want to tie a couple different elements together. The first is our strategic plan. And we have 4 goal areas that operationally at the institution, we focus a lot of our energies. And that's student success, student experience, community enrichment, and institutional efficiency. Some of that language is going to look fairly similar to our institutional success indicators because we use student success and community enrichment in both places. Where this work is focused on our daily operations as faculty and staff at the institution, This is the part we want the board to really engage with, is how do we know as an institution that what we're doing as a strategic plan bubbles up at an institutional success level, so ultimately we're meeting our mission. Right? And you'll hear the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, our accrediting body, talk to us about the term mission fulfillment. And that's really what this all bubbles up to. So with that quick background, very quick walk down memory lane, is that everybody good with that piece before we dive into the weeds?
Yes.
So we're going to focus on the ISIs, and we use that expression, institutional success indicators, today. And to set the stage, when we started our latest strategic plan, that spans the time frame from 2018 to 2023, we didn't really have an assessment framework. So we had to spend quite a bit of time building that framework to say what language resonates for us, what language works for us to assess our progress. And there is no one set framework. So we have to start from scratch. Every institution does this differently. And as someone who does accreditation visits at other institutions in the Northwest, I'm frequently asked, can't you just give us a model? And our response from the commission's perspective is, no, you have to have a model that has meaning for your own institution, right? So the first couple of years of our strategic plan was really developing how we want to measure our progress and dividing into these 4 areas of mission area, student success and community enrichment, our institutional success areas, and I'm going to break those down for you in a moment, what indicator we want to measure our progress, and what's our goal with that indicator. So as we focus on that, over the last several years, and these are things that you saw, I think we brought this to you in fall of 2019, that Betsy was working with us on. Under student success, our 3 institutional success areas focus on staying enrolled, passing gateway courses, and achieving success. And you can see the specific indicators attached to each of these. And I'm going to show you an interactive version of these in just a little bit, and what our 5-year goal is. So ultimately, by this upcoming spring term, we hope to reach these metrics or these benchmarks when it comes to these different indicators. So first to second term retention of students, we hope to hit 80%. And I'm going to show you some good news on that in just a little bit, and all the way down the line. So this is stuff you've worked with. The board is the one who gave input at this level. Then our college planning and assessment team, now we're referring to as our strategic planning team, really came up to this, brought it down to this level so we can really operationalize it from a faculty and staff perspective and help set our goals and the benchmarks.
So in the very middle, passing college level math in first year, those look the same. Is one bullet supposed to be different?
Sorry, one of those should be writing. That's my take. Yeah, good catch. Any questions on the student success? Besides that one, any questions on the student success indicators or our goals?
I just want to remind the board in case, because there's a long time between reports. These were approved by the board, as is really appropriate in your oversight role of our weekly.
And what
They certainly resonate with me. I mean, that makes sense. So.
And what's unique about these compared to our student success indicators is that these are really common metrics that higher ed folks talk about all the time, right? We didn't have to go digging and creating. You're going to see why that is important in just 1 minute.
So a quick question. Are we talking credit students or specifically or a larger group?
Good question, Alan. These are specifically looking at our certificate and degree seeking students.
Okay.
The next indicator or the next mission area, community enrichment, focuses a little bit more broadly. Yeah, all of these are focused on our certificate and degree seeking students. Other questions on the student success indicators? And if I click this to get that out of the way, am I going to shut down the entire thing? You're good to. Okay. Yeah. Oh, my tech luck, I might. The next ISI, again, institutional success indicators around community enrichment. And what was intriguing me about this, we all said it, we got a group together about 1.5 years ago. We said, just like student success, there's got to be some common metrics we can borrow from some of our community college colleagues across the United States. And after looking at about 50 different community colleges, we gave up and said, we can't rely on some common benchmarks or common metrics from our peers because not enough people measure their mission in this way. There's a couple smatterings of things that are common, and I'll share those with you in a minute, but most of these are metrics we have to say, what's meaningful to COCC? So when we look across our institutional success areas, the areas that you all signed off on about 2 to 3 years ago, of educational partnerships, business and industry connection, and lifelong engagement, how we drilled those down was a lot more challenging than the student success ones I just showed you, because those are set in common. These are unique and independent to COCC. So when we broke those down, you can see what those are. Some of these, because there's so much commonality with our strategic plan level indicators, we're able to double dip and use those in both locations. So we've got a lot of good research and work behind it. But you can see that under educational partnerships, really focusing on high schools and our partnership with OSU Cascades, business and industry connections, our CTE advisory boards. When we talk about a healthy advisory board, that's something that the instructional deans and Betsy put together over the last couple of years to say what qualifies as a healthy advisory board. And they have an annual survey that they do some qualitative assessment against in order to determine how many of their advisory boards are really operating in the way we need them to be engaging. Workplace experience is our language for co-op work experience, internships, any type of opportunity which a student can engage in a career field, kind of get some practice and get some better insights into that. And then the rest of these are pretty straightforward. These are two that continuing education repeat rates and new student rates. Those are ones that are common metrics within that division of community colleges. The rest of these aren't quite as prevalent as we might see, and may not have really good comparator institutions yet. We'll come back to that.
So I'm looking at the total value of the COCC Foundation scholarships and awards, and I totally agree that it needs to be on there. I'm curious why you have it in the lifelong engagement as opposed to educational partnership. I don't feel strongly about it, but
yeah, it wasn't a great fit either place, to be quite candid.
Okay.
Yeah, because the thought is that it takes, I mean, really, for lack of a better term, it takes folks further in their careers. It's a springboard. We didn't have one for just impact or financial aid. The educational partnerships are much more about, again, students in high school taking those classes or partnerships across the board. So that came up repeatedly in that group, Bruce. We just wanted to include it.
Good.
Yeah. And if we need a fourth category of that ISA, we probably could.
Thank you.
And then over here, of course, you can see our goal. And again, the goal is around a 5-year goal. When we end our strategic plan in this or sunset our current one this upcoming spring, this is where we hope to be with all of those different metrics. So I need to give a huge shout out to our institutional effectiveness team. They have a fantastic staff who have given us a dashboard that's interactive. We can all go look at on a daily basis. If you want to navigate it, it's under our About COCC menu. You hit college planning and assessment, and the very top big bar, you can't miss it, institutional success indicators. So I'm going to bring us out here. Jen, I need to reshare this. Here's I'm going to our website. Yeah, you just switch screen you're sharing. If you hit new share at the top. Oh, right here. Yeah. And then just. So this is off our COCC website, again, about college planning and assessment, and then you can choose institutional success or institutional success indicators. This will give you the brief background, but what we have at first is this dashboard to say, how are we making progress overall on all those different indicators we just shared with you? How are we doing in the student success mission area, and how are we doing on the community enrichment mission area? And what's great about this is that when you scroll down, you can get into pretty substantial detail on each one of these indicators if you wanted to. Now, if you remember, we said the student success ones were easier to start tracking earlier in our strategic planning process because these are all really common metrics within higher ed. So that's why you see numbers going back through the first 4 years of our strategic plan. And to highlight one of these, again, interactive dashboard, if you hover over this, indicate this, the blue box indicating we've met our goal in here, it'll tell you what our baseline is, what our goal is, and then our annual targets over the course of the 5-year plan. And that's true for any one of these boxes all the way throughout the interactive dashboard. Under community enrichment, which is one that we haven't spent as much time with, again, we had 2 years where we weren't able to measure. You're kind of building the ship as we were sailing it, right? And trying to figure out what are those common metrics that we want to, that are meaningful to the college. And you can see that we've met these in some areas. The orange means we have some progress to make. right? Or excuse me, orange means not met. And then the gray means we're still working on getting some of those data points. We chose some ones with the National Association that's becoming a little bit more challenging to get some of that information out. Some of that is also product of timing. Some of these are available at the end of every academic year. Some are available in summer. Some are available in mid-year. So you'll see some of that. This is never static for it. It's very dynamic, and we're checking in on a regular basis. That you can see the other piece I want to share on this piece is one of the things I know from an accreditation standpoint, we all know from an assessment standpoint, is if we had every single one of these in the blue, meaning we've met every single one of our goals, we probably haven't set very good benchmarks for ourselves, right? If we're knocking out of the ballpark every single time, our opportunities to continue to improve aren't there. And so that's why you'll see, I think, especially ones that we're newer in working with around community enrichment, that you'll see some of these are indicated as not met. And at the same time, if you remember all the work that we've done under our previous Title III federal grant around student success, a lot of that was focused on first term retention, first year retention, and student completion. And so you can see some changes over, especially if you look at the first term retention that happened over the course of our grant, which wrapped up around 2019, 2020. So with that grant and some of the activities really did make a positive impact for our student success.
Alicia, how often do you update your targets?
Each of the different targets have different owners attached to them, and they're reviewed at least once a year. Some of them are twice a year, depending on the flow of different of the different data points that come into them.
So it's conceivable that you might go not met, not met, not met, not met, but actually the third or fourth year, you would have easily met the first year, but you continually raise the bar.
Yeah. And a good example of one where we decreased or it shifted a little bit along the way was high school students taking credit courses because of the pandemic, right? We knew that the number of college now classes was going to decline because the high schools, one, were either shut down or weren't inviting us in because of their own social distancing requirements. So it wasn't realistic to hold us to our goal that we had originally set back in 2018. And so it really dive into the details. Up here, we'll explain the targets and the rationale and if any of those changed over time. If you, like me, are kind of a data wonk, you can really get into that level of detail. So that is a really quick overview, but there's some things I want to talk about going forward that we really learned along the way and that are going to help us as we progress in our next strategic plan. Right. So we've got this mission fulfillment framework established. We don't need to change that and start all over from ground zero. It's a strong framework. We're used to the language and we have great systems set up to support that. So we'll carry that same framework with goals and indicators and everything we just shared with you. We'll carry that forward to our new strategic plan. And our timeline, and I think we're doing really well to meet this, is that our final draft of our new strategic plan will be at the end of spring, this upcoming spring quarter. And because we have this framework set up, we'll be able to develop our assessment metrics and start measuring our progress towards our strategic plan by the end of summer. So when it really launches next fall, we'll be ready to hit the ground running, right? And so for me, that's it. Part of the evolution of institutions as we get better at strategic planning and we have this as a more routine part of our work. We're really maturing along with a lot of other community colleges in this work. So we don't have to start from ground zero every time. The other piece that we have coming down the pipeline is, again, institutional effectiveness has been doing some great work with us to help us identify who our peer institutions are across the United States. One of the accreditation standards talks about institutions having between, I think it's 4 or 5 peer institutions to share data with and compare ourselves to and set benchmarks. So it's not just our gut feeling telling us what we should be achieving for, but we really have some national norms to compare ourselves to. Through the federal database that we do all of our institution reporting through, we are able to cull that out and identify who some of our peers were. And our first review of that gave us 13 institutions across the United States, 1 in Oregon, 1 in Idaho, so and some folks that we've compared ourselves to previously, but others across the US. And so our next task is to shrink that pool down to something that's more manageable and working through the US Department of Education through their federal database, establish those comparators And the long-term goal is to establish interinstitutional agreements where we might be able to reach beyond what the feds are able to provide for us as data points. So things that are even more meaningful for our institution and theirs. And so that.
Can you give an example?
So for example, I have the IFEDS is the federal database. They measure only full-time, first-time students in college, right? So if you transferred in, you don't count. Your numbers, your success rates aren't included anywhere. If you're not going full-time, your numbers aren't included in any of that data. But if we establish an agreement with another institution who we know is similar to us on all these different characteristics, then we can get, I think, more comparable, stronger data for us.
Great, thank you.
So that we hope to have those peer institutions identified. I would say, I think our target is January, February at the latest. And that's, it's with 4,500 institutions in the country, about 2,500 community colleges. SAM and Institutional Effectiveness is really help us set some parameters through some work through SLT and come up with that list. We're going to continue to narrow that till we get a list that is, we believe, is really comparable. Like-sized communities, like-sized program offerings, those types of characteristics. Budget is another one I think that we have in our filters. And then finally, once all this work is done, we'll continue to engage with you to give you regular updates at this institutional success indicator level. So that you can provide guidance to us or any feedback that you would like us to see working in potentially different directions or small tweaks along the way. So it won't be once every 2 or 3 years like it has been now, but instead, as much as you want to hear me talk about it. Just kidding. For those of you who are falling asleep already. I want to click the button. You want to click the button?
The targets, the rationale, yeah. I do want to, yeah.
Any questions or comments or other things that insights I can provide?
Yeah, I'll just provide some feedback. This is really impressive, and I totally, you acknowledge that this level of detail is not for everybody, but it really is, that is an impressive platform to have that much information. And I think it really provides, again, you don't want to be overwhelmed with data that sort of makes people throw up their hands, but this, I think, will easily provide, useful information. And I think your comments earlier about the ability to review on a regular basis, modify going forward. Kudos to you and to the rest of the team that's put that together. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to give it a shout out. I mean, there's over the course of the last 5 years, people have been involved, whether it's strategic planning or the institutional success indicator level. I'm going to say it's 40, 50 people from across the institution. So it's been some really strong engagement to make it meaningful.
Well, and I want to thank you for presenting this because I'll go to the website, I'll go to About the College and find these and just sort of look them over and learn more. I wouldn't have known to do that, but I do now.
Thank you.
Good. I think you get to stay at the podium for an enrollment update.
But I get to invite someone to join me. All right, Tyler, come on. I believe you've all have met Tyler in other presentations, but Tyler is our Director of Admissions and Registrar and has been at the college for 10-ish years, 13 years. And in a variety of roles, in admissions and records, when he first started, in financial aid, student housing, student activities, and has been in our Director of Admissions and Registrar role for
3 years.
3 years. Thank you. Okay. So he's going to join me on this. And what we wanted to do is share with you kind of an enrollment, a little bit of an enrollment snapshot, but also give you an idea of who are our students all about, right? We often talk about this as a student profile. And so I want to start us off by just the big picture piece. And starting with what is our full-time equivalent? You've heard us refer to FTE. FTE is how the state reimburses us for our enrollments, both in a non-credit and a credit world. And there's a lot of stuff up here, I realize. So I'm going to try not to bore you too much, but walk through it quickly. We did a 5-year look back in most of these because we wanted to get to a couple of years pre-COVID. Because if we compare ourselves now to last year or the year before, the numbers are just wildly different, right? And the reason it skips, it goes 18 or 17, 18, 19, 20, this one doesn't skip. Future ones are going to skip because we used to come to you every other year. During COVID, we gave you an enrollment report every year. And I'll point that out when we're out there, when we get to those places. But what's exciting to share is when we look at our total FTE for as of this Monday, we're up slightly. And I'm going to share with you why that's important in just a minute. But FTE it's called full-time equivalent. I don't want you to think about this as that means we have 1,236.7 full-time students, right? The way the state defines full-time equivalent is interesting definition. A lot of colleges and universities nationwide follow the same definition. And I can't do the math to figure out how they call it a 1 FTE, but it's 510 student hours is 1 FTE. If someone else wants to do the math and figure that out, tell me how you got there, that'd be fantastic. Combined headcount. Also some interesting pieces in here, right? So when you look at our credit student headcount, that is really starting to bounce back this year. A lot of that is due to college now. We're going to explain that and show you that detail in a little bit. And non-credit headcount, after having a pretty good fit during COVID, is really starting to get strong. And the big difference I always love to share here is a couple different points. Non-credit headcount serves a whole lot of people across our district, but it tends to generate a smaller FTE. But really, that's where we build a lot of those really strong town-gown relationships. Credit headcount serves certainly a large number of people and it's a large number of FTE, but it makes sense because those students are spending more time with us. So that's kind of the ratio of headcount to FTE. The other caveat I want to give to you is that all of these numbers for 2022 are year to date. We do, especially in the non-credit world, have registrations that are continuing to trickle in over the course of the term. So if you've taken that Christmas cookie baking class, right, you're not showing on here yet, quite yet. You will once you actually register.
Lisa, quick question. So I'm looking at the non-credit headcount and definitely see kind of falling off the cliff in 2020, definitely COVID related. I would have thought that this year we would have been higher because would be much less of an impact of COVID. So I'm curious, any thoughts or reactions to that?
Yeah, and Anne-Marie or the folks who,
I'm gonna ask Cindy to.
yeah, Cindy.
That we are on target to reach and meet what we did last year. Those numbers are year to date. They're not.
Thank you.
total.
You answered my question.
That's it. Yeah.
So in this 2022 through 12/31,
This is through this Monday, as of 2 days ago.
whereas all the others are end of year and total accounts. Thank you. Okay.
And
Yeah. So non-credit will go up.
Yep.
That 1880 will go up and should beat the blue previous year one
Great.
by end of term.
Thank you.
Why is it by the calendar year versus the school year? Did you have a reason for measuring it that way?
sorry, these are all fall terms.
Okay.
So this
these
is all
fall
based on
terms.
our fall enrollment count. Yeah. So what we really want to focus on tonight is our credit student profile. Right? And there's some good news and some interesting news, some trends that we're starting to see come back post-pandemic. But first, we want to start with our FTE and credit headcount. Now, the reason I went back to 2017 is twofold. One, it's 15 years. It's an easy number. That's what we've usually used to gauge when we've shared this information with you in the past. But the other piece, that was just as the recession was hitting and just as our enrollment started to grow, right? And in fact, in the next year, our enrollment started to skyrocket. Over the course of 4 years, we nearly doubled. And I am a numbers person. We were one student shy of doubling our headcount in a 4-year time frame during that period. But what's interesting to me is if you look at our numbers now, 1151 on FTE and 1254, the first year of our enrollment growth during the recession, we're not that far off. And as we see what may be coming down the pipeline in terms of future unemployment rates or things along those lines, we're starting to get back to our more historical norms versus this big increase for the recession and a big decline that we had post-recession and during the pandemic. But from a credit student or FTE standpoint, we're up 1.9%. From a headcount perspective, same thing. But look at this, compared to last year, we're already increasing by 7%. And what's important to note is some historical numbers from the last couple of years. The National Center for Education Statistics, looking at the fall of 19, undergraduate enrollment, we'll call it community college and universities nationwide, was already on a tremendous decline, right? Part of that is post-recession. Part of that is shrinking high school populations. There's lots of reasons behind that. But for community colleges, going up into fall of 2019, I think they did a 10-year look back on this. There was a 26% drop in their enrollment nationally. So that was in 2019. Then the pandemic hits, and fall of 2020, there were 800 high school graduates who normally would have gone on to higher education who chose not to. And sadly, the vast majority of those we know are students of color, predominantly African-American men. And we know were veterans and low-income students, right? So some of our more vulnerable populations never took that step towards higher education at the onset of the pandemic. And we didn't see them come back in the second year either. But what we're starting to see, for nationally is a shrinking of that decline. So nationally, when you look at all colleges and universities, undergraduates are down by 1.1% as of this fall. And community colleges are down just under 0.5%. Exciting for COCC in Central Oregon, though, our headcount or FT is up. So it's a different story than what we're seeing from a lot of our peers nationally. Any questions on that? So we're going to drill down into some of this data.
Comparing this number to our Oregon, compared to our Oregon, other Oregon community colleges, how are we on that?
Unfortunately, the state hasn't released those numbers yet. They were supposed to last week, then this week. Yeah. Anecdotally,
Yeah,
I hesitate to share anecdotally.
well, I'll share anecdotally. I would say that now that our numbers have kind of shaken out and we've had a chance to look at them, if you look at combined, the thing I'm always comparing with the other presidents is credit and non-credit FTE. And I would say anecdotally, the majority are up a little bit, meaning from anywhere from 0.5% to 2 or 3%. Some are down, some are up more than that, but up a little bit seems to be the descriptor that I would use. And that puts us very similarly with other schools.
Thank you.
So we're going to break this down a little bit for you to give you a better idea of who our students really are. So that's the enrollment report, but let's learn a little bit more about this year's crop of students.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share a little bit about looking at different student populations as we start drilling down just a little bit more. We're gonna find some other interesting trends. And first I'm gonna just take a look at, if you look at our certificate and degree seeking students compared to our non-certificate and degree seeking students, one thing you're gonna notice there is that our percentage of non-certificate and degree seeking students jumped quite a bit over this last year. And just to give you some kind of perspective, historical norms for us have been about 70-30, so 70%, 30%. So it's been a little bit abnormal over the past few years, and we're starting to see that kind of come back to some of the norms. Another reason for this, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute, if you've heard about College Now a couple of different times, but College Now students, just so you know who those students are, College Now students are students who are duly enrolled in the high schools, but they're taking courses within the high schools, but for credit here at COCC. So that's how we define College Now students. And we've seen an increase in College Now students, and they're considered non-certificate and degree seeking. So that plays a little bit of a role into that number as well. So taking a look at our student types, so we have quite a few different student types that we can look at, but I'm going to focus in for a moment just on what we consider our new students at COCC. So we have new first time, and we have our students who are returning after an absence, so basically returning to COCC after at least a year or more, and then students who are transferring in from other institutions. And what I really want to speak to here, you'll see our transfer numbers are up, our returning after absence and new students are still a bit down. But what's encouraging with these numbers, and what you won't see on this screen, is that what we call our conversion rate or our yield rate, which is the number of students that submit an application to COCC, but then actually move forward and register for a course. That percentage of students is up 2% year to year, which is super encouraging. So we're seeing more of our students who apply actually move through the process and register for a class. And that's partly due to our customer relationship management tool, so what we call our CRM tool, which allows us to have a strategic communication plan that's automated. and timely for students, so that students are getting text messages and emails when they need to get text messages and emails to help them through the process. So we're really encouraged by the fact that we are really helping our students who are applying through the process of getting them registered. The other thing I will point out, and again, back to that College Now number, you can see where that's really jumped up. There's a couple of reasons for this. So one of the reasons is we've had a process change with College Now. So we're processing applications and registrations for College Now earlier in the process this year. So we're going to see this level off a little bit towards spring term. But as you can see, the other reason is it's just really bouncing back. I mean, during the pandemic, you see 27. I mean, that's pretty low, right? When all the high schools were going remote. So there's a lot of really good energy and a lot of, our folks on Cindy's team that are doing great work in the high schools, and students are really interested in taking courses in their high schools for credit here at CCC. So it's an encouraging number to see.
Do you have a sense, is that mostly because the students want to challenge themselves, or is it more for financial implications? Or is it hard to tell? Do you have that level of?
I mean, there's just a lot of energy for high school students to get a jump on their higher
But I
education.
mean, that's more than bouncing back. I mean, that's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
you fell off your trampoline at that point.
Yeah. That's
In a good way.
That's a good one. I'm gonna use that one
I
again.
can remember that. Take a look at full-time versus part-time students. Again, doing a little comparison here, again, a number that you'll notice is that, as Alicia pointed out, our head counts up, right? But we're also seeing that percentage of our students that are part-time are also moving up, which basically means we're seeing more students, but we're seeing more students who are attending part-time. This could be for a lot of reasons, but one of I think the bigger reasons what we're hearing from students a lot is that the job market the way it is, there's jobs out there. So we're seeing a lot of our students able to be employed and also pursue their education, which then means they can't necessarily always take a full load because they are working at the same time. So that's a little bit of a story behind that.
Real quick, so are
Yeah.
these numbers counting just strictly our credit?
Credit.
So it has nothing to do with our continuing education?
No, just credits.
Right.
Yeah. So looking at ethnicity here, as we just look at comparing our students of color and our white students, as well as some that have no response, you can kind of see some trends here. Our students of color have kind of come up a little bit over the last year, where our white students have been on kind of a steady decline. But one thing just to note when you look at this data, it's really not a very clear picture because our students can select multiple options, which means they're represented multiple times within this data. So this isn't, if you did the math, this isn't going to add up to our total head count because students are represented multiple times. So it's really kind of hard to get a real clear picture of what this means, but we thought it would be important to show you and you can at least see some trends.
Yeah, Bruce, you asked a question on the earlier presentation about what are some examples of things we would pull from our federal database and maybe have through an interinstitutional agreement. Department of Ed, when we re-record our data, when it comes to whether someone identifies as Black, Indigenous, Latinx, or other person of color, if a student chooses more than one category, the feds move all those students into the Latinx bucket. Whether it's right or wrong, yes, we can conjecture all day long, and that's the way the feds are. So that's not a good comparator for us, but hopefully through some interinstitutional agreements, we can get some better data. We also want to give students the opportunity to recognize that they don't always fit in one box, right? And so to really honor who they are, we give them the opportunities to mark as many ethnicities that they identify.
Let me, I don't know if push back is the right word. So let me, the number of people that chose not to respond, what do you make of that? And I'm going to extrapolate, let's say 3-4 years down the road. What if that number is half of the students? I mean, that throws any data that we gather up, it makes it somewhat irrelevant. So I'm curious whether you see that as a troubling trend for data collection, or, I mean, in some ways it's kind of a balance of wanting to respect where students want, but at the same time, I think there are implications in much the same way at the high school level, students opting out of taking tests is really not a good thing for the overall system. If you want to just react to my rambling there.
No, it wasn't friendly at all. So I think it was in 2016 was the first year we started giving students the option to not respond. And the numbers instantly that first year were like 350 so on, right? And so we know that that's something that is of importance to our students to not have to necessarily fit in a box, whether that's on ethnicity, or if we get to the place of collecting gender identification or anything else where students can choose to say, I want to fit this in these neat little boxes that someone else has defined, or I'm more complex than that and I choose not to respond. So it is challenging from a data standpoint, yet we also want to create, especially on an admissions front, which is where most of this data is gathered, we want to create a sense of atmosphere that's welcoming and respectful of what that student's choice might be.
I still go back to it. If that trend continues, the data collection will be useless.
Perhaps on this particular data.
Okay.
A question I want to ask sometime. You don't have to answer it now, but I'll just ask it. And it has to do with part-time students and full FTEs, full-time equivalent. And it's like, what's the challenge? Is there a bigger challenge? Because they aren't in a program you run through and you know they're going to be full classes all along. They're going to kind of jump in and out, and you might have half classes, full classes. You don't have to answer it now, but sometime, tell me about that challenge just so I can talk about FTE part-time versus FTE credit.
But I think we can, it's fairly straightforward answer, Ellen, in that we've got so much experience in Anne-Marie and her team of juggling class enrollments and setting certain minimums. Sometimes we might have to cancel class, but we're really careful about doing that if we can't place them. We try to avoid that if we can't place them in another of the same course. So when you talk about a student's full-time enrollment, which is 12 credits or more, or part-time enrollment, 11 credits or less, that's just a natural piece of community college operations. And really faculty and department chairs are really responsive to making sure that there's enough students in the class to make it engaging, and that we also have a minimum threshold that we set for many of our courses. We have lowered those numbers for our branch campuses the last couple of years to honor that those are smaller campuses during the pandemic. They needed to have a different threshold set. But Anne-Marie, if there's something else you'd like to
I think I had shared with the board before our experiment this year with letting those branch campuses go at even one student if the faculty member and chair think that it is pedagogically appropriate to do that. So when we get to those really known numbers, we need to be thinking about what is right for this discipline and for what we're trying to achieve with the outcomes of this class. But we are trying to build some consistency in our schedule and offer those even at low numbers to build enrollment in those campuses.
Does that help, Ellen?
Well, it does. So I guess if I was talking to a legislature, I could really say that part-time students are a challenge in that it's more expensive to teach them because our classes aren't as efficient. And I don't know if I can say that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't think we can say that. I think you could say that one of the reasons it's important to be aware of the large percentage of part-time students that are typical in community colleges is because that extends the time to their completion and their meeting a goal. So community college numbers pretty typically in comparison to four-year institutions look quite poor in terms of, did they complete a degree in X amount of time? Did they transfer in X amount of time? It just takes our students longer. So it's one of the reasons why we can't just toss our hands up and say, oh, what are we going to do? It's one of the reasons why a lot of our data doesn't look so good when legislatures look at the data of completion and retention. Even retention, because we have students who pretty commonly opt in and then take a semester off. Right? So it's not you know, it's not the college that most of us went to, where we went at age 18 and we went full time and we were done in 4 years. That is the minority of students nationally. It's this, and especially smaller number when you look at completion for community college students.
And our classes have a blend of part-time and full-time students in them.
Yeah.
Jen and I were in a class, I wouldn't know if she's full-time, part-time unless we shared that. So it really is about the number of students in each course that sets that threshold, not their enrollment status. If that makes sense.
And it's been really good. So it's not a bad thing in this economy to have a lot of part-time students. One, it tells us that a lot of people are working, that's okay, that's one of our outcomes, right? But students always come to us for degrees, and that's not always our success. Sometimes they come to us for a certification. So I might have somebody come here, they want to work at Les Schwab. They need to take 8 of our auto classes or 6 of our auto classes to get an ASE certification. They don't care about a degree. They want that certification. Just like if I have someone who needs to get some baking skills and they get certification after 1 baking class, or St. Charles needs phlebotomists all the time. They take 1 class. They're not going to take a phlebotomy degree. Just like we have tons of certified nursing assistant students who they're in the degree program, but they need 1 class to go to work. So sometimes when we're counting our success indicators, we're actually sometimes counting up those classes or those groups of classes to say, well, what we wanted to do was get an individual who's already in the labor force in many cases, but to get them a better job in the labor force. And so sometimes counting those numbers, it's not just counting the degrees, but did they get a certification, which way often count those. Good.
Great point, Tony. Thank you.
All right, I'll move through this slide pretty quick. It's just taking a look at age and gender. You will see for average age, we've seen a decline over the past 5 years. And I'll just pause for just a moment because I think this is really important for everybody to hear that now that we're back in our in-district high schools, which is super exciting, all of us, I know, from Office of Diversity, Inclusion, Instruction, Recruitment and Outreach, there's just some incredible, but really positive momentum behind high school students and their interest in higher education again, which we just did not feel during the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, we're just feeling some good energy in the high schools, and not just for higher ed, but for community college, for staying local, which is interesting. We'll see how that translates, but that's just what we're hearing from students in the high schools, which is pretty cool. Not a whole lot to report on when you take a look at gender comparisons, other than male. You'll see the percentage of male students has started to increase over the past couple of years. Headcount by residency. This is just taking a look at across our district. And if you see the little plus there by Madras, that just means Madras plus the surrounding area. We just couldn't list everything out there for you. And I'll just quickly point out that this is, again, some encouraging data that we're basically up across all of these areas, except for Redmond, where we're kind of flat, and Sisters, where we're down a bit for those numbers. But generally, we are up. And if you look at Bend and Sun River, you can see the fairly steep decline there, and to see that kind of bounce back is really encouraging. And lastly, before you just take a look at financial need, if you look at students with financial need, you can see the number of students who are grant eligible at the top there, and then the percentage of financial aid students that are grant eligible. But what's
And what we mean by grant eligible those are typically those students with the highest level of financial need. So they're eligible for the federal Pell Grant, State of Oregon Opportunity Grant, right? So these are our most financial students with greatest amount of assistance needed to attend higher ed.
Yeah. And what's really interesting to focus on here, though, is if you look across all of our degree seeking students, the percentage of our degree seeking students that are considered grant eligible, I mean, you can see that fall 19 to 20, that's pretty steep drop off for those students. It really related to the pandemic, and kind of what the story this tells is that, you know, some of, to Alicia's point, are underrepresented or students with higher financial need have just been slower to come back. It's pretty interesting from the pandemic. And another just quick thing to note, which, you know, is interesting as well, because historically community colleges, you know, we really are tracking on unemployment rates. So when the pandemic hit, the unemployment rate bounced up to 14%. Historically, community college enrollment would follow, right? We would go up as well, but the pandemic was different, right? We all know we actually dropped. So there's almost this new level created, and then post-pandemic, those unemployment rates have started to slowly come back down. And so we've seen what has been normally the case is our enrollment also kind of comes down with those. So for a lot of reasons, right? Health and safety, there's a lot of reasons that students didn't come back during those higher unemployment rates, but we are starting to see some of those students come back. We can see that from 30% to 33%. So again, I think the general story is things are coming back a little bit, which is nice to see.
That's a lot of stuff we just threw at you. So some key takeaways. Enrollment is starting to return and return for us more so than we see nationally. So that's a COCC positive. The increase in part-time students means that we have more students taking smaller course loads. Again, economy might be driving some of that, employment might be driving that, kind of working their way back into higher ed, post-pandemic is part of that. Our students of color, our BIPOC population is increasing at faster rates than their white counterparts when we look at the shift in those numbers. And we're seeing an increase in students from all of our communities with a slight decrease in Redmond, a little bit more decrease in Sisters in the surrounding areas. And our lower income students are not at the historical norms, right? And to Tyler's point, we're hopefully starting to see some of those students return to higher ed as a way, as an economic driver to better employment. But I love this quote. This was just recently, and I think it was the Community College Daily. Terry Hartle, who's the Senior Vice President at ACE, the American Council on Education. There are roughly 4,500 colleges and universities in the United States. There are roughly 4,500 stories about fall 22 enrollment. Right, when the pandemic hit, a lot of our stories parallel each other. And there were news stories or things that we didn't expect, to some of the comments that Tyler made. When you look across the country, you can read these headlines about dire enrollment drops, and then you see all these success stories, or these huge success stories, and then you see all these dire enrollment drops. And as I talk to my colleagues across the state, Lori does the same, we're just not seeing a consistent story yet. I think just post-pandemic thing, everybody's reacting differently, every community's reacting differently, and every higher education sector is reacting tremendously different. So I thought that was a good closing quote to share with you. And after throwing a lot of data at you through our institutional success indicators and enrollment report, I'm happy to answer any other questions. I do want to give a huge shout out to Chris Everton, our data analyst in Office of Institutional Effectiveness. He just did an amazing job helping us pull all this data together. We do, just like our institutional success indicators, have dashboards that several of us monitor on a daily basis, if not weekly basis. That helps us really pull this work together. So many thanks to Chris and everybody in that office for their great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Any questions, comments? Again, appreciate both of you guys with that presentation. It is nice. Let's hope that this trend continues.
I think
Thank you.
Yeah,
one of the
great.
key takeaways that Tyler shared is things just aren't as predictable as they used to be. And so in a lot of ways, it just makes our work a little bit more challenging, and we can't depend on the way things always used to happen. They're going to happen again.
We have to be adaptable.
Yeah, there's no guidebook in some ways. Yeah.
Well, the adaptable, it's a nice segue to our next item, which is to hear from Christine Rochow on e-learning trends.
Okay.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Christine Rochow, and I'm the director of e-learning. So good news, I have more data for you. The good news, the better news is that it's good data. And Alicia and Tyler have done a really marvelous job of setting up a lot of data context for some of what I'm going to talk about, particularly when it comes to what FTE means, because you're going to see that quite a lot in this presentation. So Dr. Shepley asked me to talk about what we've been seeing. So this is the who, what, where, when, how we're doing. First of all, just very briefly, this is our department makeup. There's 2 administrators, 2 classified staff, and 1 part-time irregular wage staff. So we are small but mighty. And then this is who we work with to provide scope for what we do. We work really extremely intersectionally across the COCC campus and community. Although support for the learning management system of Canvas is actually what you heard me talk about the last time I was at a board meeting. Is a large component of the services that we provide. Those services extend to many different areas, and you can see some of them on the left. We partner with community education, first year experience, disability services, the foundation, and lots more. And then on the right are some of the technologies that we support. Some of them are used within Canvas, some of them aren't, but they're available to all of our instructors, regardless of the delivery method, which is the important part that I want you to take away here. So this is just to bring your attention to the breadth of where e-learning is working, and to keep in mind when we talk about the ways that we've grown and changed. And one area in particular where we've specifically seen a lot of growth is how we offer classes. So pre-COVID, we offered 90% or more of our classes in one of these three methodologies: in-person, face-to-face, that's your traditional classroom like this, in front of a teacher, in front of a whiteboard. In-person, online, that's what we used to call hybrid classes, and then our fully online asynchronous courses. And now we offer all of these, plus a few others for special cases. I think technically we have 7 listed delivery methods. So from left to right, we move again from that traditional face-to-face, fully synchronous, through fully asynchronous, and lots in the middle, which are represented by our various remote options. So students now have a much wider menu when it comes to selecting courses that suit their specific schedules, their preferred instructional modes, and even what campus can take classes on.
What's the difference between remote and online?
So remote is, if you're talking about this remote, you are sitting in front of your computer at home at a specific time with a specific group of students doing things in lockstep. Versus online, you're working by yourself through the material without synchronous instruction. And yes, it does get a little bit confusing because they all have very minor shades of different. So here's a breakdown of how those courses were split across those original delivery methods in fall of 2017. And like Alicia, I'm using 2017 because it's a solidly pre-pandemic year with very typical numbers for what we were seeing around that time. And in that case, it was 77% of our classes were traditional face-to-face, 14% were represented by online and hybrid, and 9% were other. Those were those special courses that at the time we did not classify. This was very representative of COCC at that time. And this is what it looks like now. Here's a breakdown of this fall specifically. So our online and our in-person online, or we call it hybrid, those offerings have more than doubled. Online went from 8% to 21%, in-person online from 6% to 12%. Anything that's purplish on that side of the chart is a methodology that has a critical component of it that's facilitated out of the e-learning department. And I'll refer to those types of classes as technology assisted in later slides. So all COC's classes, regardless of their delivery methods, use Canvas and other academic technology resources. But I do think it's pretty incredible that in 2 years, we're seeing the options that students have for those truly technology assisted classes. That's that in-person, online, the online, and the remote options. They've left from 14% of our total delivery to over 40%.
Can I ask a question about that last slide?
Yes.
What is the difference between other and special?
That's a really good question. It doesn't change all the time. Special would be things like rolling enrollment. Some of our you can enroll anytime classes.
Open entry, open exit.
Open ed, thank you. That's the other. Honestly, it's not listed in Tableau, which is where I got this data from. So if anyone has an example.
Anne Marie, do you have?
I wish I did. I am not familiar with that category, to be honest with you. We have been using special as anything that didn't quite fit into the other categories.
Yeah.
So Dean, I don't know if you know anything different than I do, but
Yeah, it's incredibly ambiguous.
Yeah.
And we did not have a special category until a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when these delivery methods were really confirmed and integrated into our schedule. It was all considered other. So for purposes of this chart, anything that's green is something that doesn't fall within the scope of either traditional face-to-face or technology assisted. If that helps.
So if you can't explain what goes into special, then what goes into other?
I'm the person who decides that. So.
I'm only gonna speculate here because I don't know the answer to the question. My guess is that as things were evolving during COVID and all of these methods were developing and changing and we were deciding what to call them. I'm gonna blame Betsy Julian. At some point, at some point, and she would know if she were here. But I don't know, and Tony, do you want to take your guess?
I know that special is when somebody's defined categories, when they just don't fit for what we're doing. And it's a different conversation, which would, at the percentage that it's at right now, it may not be worth calling out because what those really are going to be are 1%, 2%.
Yeah, they're very, very.
So when you're putting a variety of those modes together, it's getting put as special. I suspect that other is probably when you have like a field-based class, for example, that might have multiple components, but it just doesn't fit nicely.
Kind of thing, maybe.
You might be on it, yeah, like an apprenticeship or like CWEs. So like cooperative work experience, right? Wouldn't fit into exactly in person.
Yes, thank you.
I just want to note that that is not listed among our definitions of delivery modes that we advertise to students and put on the web. So I'm guessing it's an IE specific categorization.
Yes, I believe
I'm going to
so.
find out.
I just didn't want to give you a graph that didn't add up to 100%. So, but again, what I really want you to focus on is basically everything but the green. So especially that purple, because that is about 40, 42, 44% of our total delivery. So enrollments, how many students are actually taking these classes? This chart represents our enrollment trends in online only courses. And I'm using online and not any of the other remote options because it gives us a really apples to apples comparison to our pre-pandemic numbers. The x-axis that goes up to 1,500, that's your FTE in online classes. Remember, FTE is that total number of course hours, not head count. And then what I've added here with the percent is the percent that represents, it's the percent of online courses compared to our total FTE offerings. So we're seeing very slow growth in these first 3 years. So 17 through 20, going from 13, 14, 16, and then kaboom, COVID happens. And suddenly our online classes make up over almost 40% of what we are offering. Then we have last fall, easing back online. That number is still a tiny bit inflated because we were still working our way back to fully on campus. And then the spring, this is our year to date. So this is where we are for this fall currently as of like 4 days ago. Right now, that's 29% of our FTE is online. And if we take that number and project against our last fall, we're probably going to round out the year at about 27% for online. So this is speculative, but it's based off of our history here. If we look closer,
why
is green so small and
Because
so
the
big?
green is relative to the y-axis.
yeah, and that's
That one,
because
okay.
it's representative of the actual head count. It makes up 27% of what we currently have, but this
Okay.
total number is like 370.
Why is it projected lower this year than last year? I would have
Because we
thought
offered
that-
more online classes last fall.
Okay.
We had about 82% of what we offered last fall is what we're offering this fall. And that's just because we have more
Okay, thank
basic
you.
classes back. Different graphics of this category, we're also going to see sustained higher levels of enrollment in those online classes, in our pilot class students, in students over the age of 25, and in students who are out of district. There are a lot of reasons why that might be, but what the numbers do tell us is we're serving a broader spectrum of students in those classes than we were before.
Can I ask another question? So what are we doing? You mentioned offering fewer classes online now because we have more in-person classes again. What are we doing to gauge what the demand is from our students, so that we have the right mix, so that we don't just go back to a higher mix of in-person just because we think that that's what they want?
I see Anne Marie. Yes, please. Laura, thank you for that question. We have done a couple of years of surveys of students about preferences. We started in 2020, 21. We did another survey. We've also done some looking at course success data in the different delivery modes. We do sort of instinctually try and provide a sets of courses across days and times and different delivery modes, but we determine delivery modes according to the data that we've gotten both from the surveys and student success metrics. And then of course, working in branch campuses, we have some different kinds of goals about providing adequate numbers of classes that can help students get the AAOT on those campuses. Does that answer your question? Laura?
Yes.
Great. Okay, great. So we've seen that we can get students into the online classes, but can we keep them there? And the good news is yes. So far we are. This chart online classes. So basically how many students dropped from the first day of term through weeks 1 through 4. And then this number here, or this bar, these long bars here, that's week 10. That's the end of term right before the withdrawal deadline. Historically, we see that progressive decline in weeks 1 through 4, and then you get that big drop. But what you can see, if you look at that angle, we are getting better at retaining our online students over the years. Historically, we're getting better at that. And if you look closely between fall 21 and fall 2022, our week 1 through 4 decline is a lot shallower, even compared to last year. And that becomes even more clear if you look at week 4. Last fall at week 4, we'd lost about 5.5% of our online students compared to that first day of term. This fall at week 4, we only lost 1.6%.
Whatever it's worth, I think these data are really striking and really promising, because what they say is we're getting better at what we're doing the more we do it, right? We're getting better with practice. And I haven't charted online success rates or retention rates here, but the national trends are pretty, in a lot of ways, pretty dismal. There's just high drop rate in online courses. This is very impressive to me.
And so again, the y-axis is raw numbers of students that have dropped the online course, and it's cumulative.
No, this represents your percent of total.
Well, I understand because the 5.5 looks like it should be more like it's 7.
That's. Well, I mean, it is.
The 1.6, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, PowerPoint doesn't chart. But it is, the numbers are correct. The numbers come from the same database that Alicia and Tyler and Institutional Effectiveness. So if you ever want to look at these and you want to look at them in deeper, if you want to look at the demographics, you want to look at delivery modes other than online, you want to look at campus, you can do that.
Quick question. So if they come in person, I got the impression that students could stay after class and talk to their teacher and understand things they were confused about in class, and therefore they keep their success rate up. Does that happen online?
Yes, absolutely. Online instructors are required to have office hours, just same as face-to-face class students, the same as face-to-face instructors. A lot of our instructors, they were starting to do this pre-pandemic, and of course it exploded post-pandemic as well. They were having virtual office hours. So students could come in and during their regularly stated time, whatever is in their syllabus, they could come in and join. We also saw a lot of faculty support through email and sometimes even on their phone as well. Students would just call them up. So the opportunity still definitely exists for online students.
So is this online?
This is all online. Everything that I'm talking about is going to be about online only, unless I say otherwise, and there's only one slide.
So in my opinion, that graph is not right.
That our weekly nutrition for students who are taking our online classes.
I think Joe's saying the same thing I do. It's not matching up. If that left axis is really percent, then those are not accurate. That's, I mean, we'll trust the numbers of the 5.5 and 1.6. But
They assign tutor to be.
we'll follow up later.
Do you know how many students take their classes on their phone versus the computer?
Not specifically, but I can tell you that some definitely do. And that was a big part of the reason why we chose the new learning management system that we did, is because it's fully mobile compatible. So they can do 99% of their coursework on their phone if they needed to.
Good, because it seems to me everybody's on the phone
Yeah.
all the time, and I never see them on the computer.
Absolutely. And we see that more in our outlying areas as well, where access to a computer lab is trickier. During the pandemic, students were sitting in a parking lot, getting Wi-Fi on their phone and taking their classes that way. But yes, it's an increasing need even now that we're post-pandemic. It's just everyone's got their computer in their pocket.
So FYI, those numbers make sense. Those are accurate. It was the pink that was not accurate.
The pinks. The numbers are true.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah. All right. So looking at student success. The good news is that not only are we hanging on to our students longer, but more of them are succeeding. This looks at student success rates in online classes only. In 17 through 19, you're doing pretty standard, pretty decent, around 77%. Like Lori was saying, that's really typical for community colleges across the nation. This is just, it's how it was. Not just at CSTO. For comparison, sake, our face-to-face retention in 2017 was around 83. We shot up quite a bit in our peak remote and online instruction year. And here is where we ended in 21-22 at 82.7, about 5%. This is online. This is remote online. And I find this interesting. Remember, remote online used to be referred to as hybrid. This is a very common trend as well, where blended delivery methods have a higher rate of success than either of their pure forms of delivery. So higher than traditional face-to-face and higher than purely online. That's holding true for COCC as well as nationally. And I'll share this with you because on the next slide, I'm going to frame those numbers within a more national context, where blended instruction is really becoming more of a post-pandemic norm. So it's important to note that it was and still is where we see our best rates of student success, even if the number of classes that we offer in online and hybrid is smaller comparatively to our larger offerings, which is true.
What is the narrative why a hybrid would be higher than that? Is not intuitive to me.
It's, there's a lot of reasons why that could be. Generally, we think it's because students are getting the best of both worlds when they get to choose that delivery method. So online students that take classes in anything other than face-to-face tend to be very self-selective in general. They take that methodology because they either know that it works for their particular learning style, there's an instructor that they trust who's teaching that class in that methodology, or it works for their schedule. But what we see with those blended learning options is not only do they get to flex their time a little bit, they have more flexibility with when they attend class and when they are doing their work at home and online, but also blended delivery methods tend to maximize their class time. You're spending more time talking with the students or having more of those formative discussions in the class, and then you get to leverage your out.
So the curriculum delivery is actually a little bit different.
It's a little bit
Okay,
different.
thank you.
too.
That helps. Uh-huh.
Yep. Okay. This is the narrative piece of what's happening broadly across the country. We're definitely showing that positive change can come out of a not so positive situation. And what COVID provided for us and for everyone was a nearly perfect experiment of how online and blended instruction can improve student success. As I was just saying, pre-COVID, students and online teachers were very self-selective about either teaching or taking classes in those delivery methods. And then in the middle of it, they didn't have a choice. Everyone was taking in whatever delivery mode was available, whether we liked it or not. And what we're seeing now is this kind of settling in the middle. Faculty and students without prior exposure to technology-assisted instruction are discovering that they actually like some parts of it. And that fully online or that any, be that in our fully online or in any of those blended remote instruction methods. One of the studies that talks about this, which thank you, Laura Bomi, for sharing that with me, reported that 67% of our formerly face-to-face only instructors, those instructors who before COVID had only ever taught in a traditional classroom, are now still using their online tools in their classes now. So even though they are back in their preferred delivery method, they're still using the academic technology tools. That kind of adoption used to happen very, very slowly. If you think back to my enrollment slide, when we looked at 17 through 20, we were increasing by about 1.5% every year. That was happening by word of mouth. It was happening out of necessity versus preference sometimes. Very organic, very slow growth. And what we're now seeing with this number across the country is, and this is one of those things that people are studying like crazy because it's a really interesting and once in a lifetime kind of phenomenon. So we've had 6 to 7, even 8 years of growth packed into 2 years. And it forced us really to be better teachers, and it forced us to be better students. Our office e-learning has always maintained that good instruction in online classes is just good instruction. The pedagogy, the delivery methods, the way you engage your students, things like universal design for learning, which is an accessible way of approaching your curriculum and content. Regular and substantive interactions, how students are engaging with each other and with the faculty member, building learning communities, connecting the students together in their course of study, and using the right tools for the right reasons are all things that make a class more successful. So good online course design is generally just good course design. What COVID did was it allowed us to this very focused opportunity to take what we know about online course design and show it and share it with everybody in the campus community writ large. So, how are we doing it? This is kind of what I think it looks like in a nutshell. And I'm not going to read you the entire slide because there's lots of stuff here, but you can really bucket the ideas or the areas where we've poured our efforts the last 2 years into these 3 categories: robust student support. So we know that high quality support eases adoption of new information, as well as getting students the information that they need when they need it in the format that they want to engage in, with focused faculty training and really honing in on how academic technology and educational pedagogy can support instruction and make a better learning experience, regardless of the delivery method. And to make sure that the technology that we use is dependable, multi-purpose, efficient, and that it lowers barriers to student learning and faculty instruction versus making it more difficult. Our solely e-learning efforts, a lot of them are work that we did collaboratively with other groups on campus, working holistically to make our students' experience smoother, better, more efficient. So, in summary, that's a lot of data, but we have a higher rate of students taking online classes. More of those students are staying in their online classes, and more of them are succeeding in their online classes. What it means to be e-learning has changed tremendously in the last 2 years. And really what it means to offer instruction in a higher education institution has changed tremendously. But at COCC, what we're really seeing as this dust settles is a landscape that is definitely different, but we're growing, we're succeeding, we're thriving, and I think we can be really proud of that. Thank you. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them or punt them to the appropriate official body.
So one, thank you very much. I'm encouraged that online learning is successful and growing. If I was on the online part of a hybrid class, can I record it on my instrument, my laptop, my phone, and then watch it again?
It depends. Some instructors will offer their lectures as they will record them and post them for students as a matter of course. But that's the instructor doing it. Students are not supposed to be recording their lectures themselves, except under very specific circumstances coming out of the Office of Disability Services. We do have a FERPA policy that speaks directly to that.
Okay, it's not like Zoom where you can just record it. And then you can go.
No, if they are attending a Zoom hosted class, then the instructor would be the only one who had the ability to record it through Zoom. I mean, they could bring out their phone and do it, but if they did that, they would be in violation of our policy unless otherwise accepted.
And that's from a student privacy standpoint, right? So under our federal privacy laws, we prohibit some of that type of activity.
It just might be helpful for some students who have to see it.
And quite a few instructors do record their lectures and post them and make them available. That's actually a very common thing, but it's controlled from the instructor's standpoint.
Any other questions?
Can I?
Go ahead, Laura.
So I guess it's probably more of a comment than a question, but I was really heartened to see the completion statistics or the success statistics, because I remember before COVID, we asked a number of times why we didn't have more classes available online. And the answer was largely twofold: technology and the need to train our faculty in that method of delivery. And I'm delighted to know that, we were sort of forced into it without our permission given COVID. That's not the part I'm delighted about. I'm delighted about the fact that we managed to sort of handle it anyway. So I think that's really a great tribute to our staff and our faculty in making it happen. And I'm delighted and thrilled to see all of that. So not really a question, more a comment.
I absolutely agree. Our faculty went through a total crash course in how to teach online. And then we made them learn a new learning management system in the middle of that, which they did remarkably well on and has proven to be really successful overall in this last. We're coming up on winter term will be our full year on campus. So.
Okay. Christine, I want to echo Laura's comments, and this really is something that the board has asked at various times in our retreat. I mean, in essence, sort of, okay, we know that a lot happened during COVID. What are things that we learned from that, and what are the things that we want to keep going forward? I was really struck by some of the statistics, not only in terms of the percentage that do only in-person learning, that's just much lower than I would have imagined. As my wife said, I need to remove and replace that tape in my head. But again, really appreciate your ability to share with us a lot of the different methods and keeping on top of ways that we continue to try to meet the needs of our students. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Happy to present you many numbers anytime.
Great, thank you.
All right.
So the next item, a little bit interesting, we are going to adjourn in our capacity as the board of COCC, and we are going to reconvene as what is known as a contract review board. We are the same people. We are simply wearing different hats. And this is an ability for us, this gives us the ability to then discuss and hopefully act upon for an expedited RFP. So at that point, we've adjourned to a contract review board meeting. I'd like to open the contract review board meeting. Zach, you going to be leading this? Is it you?
Yeah, and I don't know if there's any public comment on this one either. I think that's appropriate again if we reconvene on a new format.
Okay. Is there anybody that wants to make a comment on it? The proposal is to use an expedited contracting process for the Madras campus.
And we have Jeremy Green here, the Madras Campus Director and Capital Projects Manager. Thanks for logging in, Jeremy. We see you. Looks like you're developing photographs, et cetera. And Charlie Andreessen here, who's been a key team for this part. You see in your board packet the resolution and background for the expedited process. And again, happy to answer any questions on that. I don't want to be repetitive for the point of that. I think both Jim and Joe on the real estate committee and Laura are familiar with this. I know Bruce, you are from the city. So again, just happy to entertain any questions. We think this is a cost and time savings for the project and is the right fit for this particular expansion project.
Great, thank you, Zach, and I apologize, I missed, I saw that now it's an asterisk and not a P, so my bad. So there's not a formal presentation, this is really an opportunity for us to respond to the resolution that was in our packet. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Again, like Zach said, this is something that I know City of Bend, we use this on numerous occasions. We're very, very pleased with it. This is certainly something that I'm supportive of. I know same with Alan.
Yeah, and it's a great process that really gives you the better product with a more cost-efficient price. One of the challenges that I kind of had experience with in the past is that the private sector gets a little frustrated with it because they don't feel like they can really engage as much as they want. You know, it's not like they get a bid and then they get the packet, they put their bid together and they throw it back at you. But I guess just when you choose your construction manager, contractor person, that's a process you might want to just work harder at it to make sure that they don't feel like they missed out.
Great point.
And I've been through a fair amount of these contract reviews, and this is the best one, in my opinion. Sometimes it doesn't mean you save a lot of money, but it's a faster process in regards to getting the job done. And there's only one person responsible, that our staff, our contracting, Zach's of the world, and Jeremy of the world. You have one person who's responsible for this whole project. I've been on a couple of projects where we didn't do this, and we ended up in mediation. The longest one was 7 days. I will never want to do something like that. It was a nightmare having 500 people at the table. I'm an advocate for it.
Thanks, Jeff.
So we're ready for
Any other questions or comments before we move to a motion? Okay.
So be resolved that the Central Oregon Community College Board of Directors, acting as the contract review board, adopts approving an exemption from competitive bidding for the Madras Campus expansion project at the COCC Madras Campus in Madras, Oregon.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Joe. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Appreciate that. At this point, we will now adjourn back to our regular board meeting.
Thank you.
The next item is revision to our board zone rebalancing. And Jen, I see you threw the short straw.
I'm here to give you an eerie sense of deja vu. Didn't you already vote on this? The answer is yeah. So after you voted to approve the PSU redrawn maps for the last census, Deschutes County came back to the college and said, wait, we have just a few other changes we hope you can make. And all of those changes were not substantive. They were all about ensuring that the county could retain more voting precincts so that we wouldn't be splitting existing precincts into further. When we looked at the requested changes, they were all in either areas with no population. It was just about incorporating land boundaries or with such minimal population changes that it was fine. So PSU went back. They made almost all of the changes that the Deschutes County requested. No additional changes were requested from our other counties. And so what you see in your packet is an updated resolution noting those changes, as well as a map that reflects the I promise now final maps. And again, no incumbent board member zones were changed, no substantial population shifts to speak of. They were really quite small, and now we can officially say that the college, PSU, and Deschutes County are all have reached an accord with this map.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Jen?
No, I just say that Portland State could have done better because they should have been working with the county to figure that all out.
You know, Alan, the frustrating thing for me is that this only ever happens every 10 years. So we have this institutional knowledge vacuum for me. So I think I've learned about the parties that need to have more conversations earlier on. But I will agree with you that some mistakes were made with how this normally goes, and parties should know to talk to one another. But they're all talking now, and everyone's happy with what you see in front of them. So.
Great. Someone want to make a motion?
I move to accept the revised board member zones as reflected in the attached maps. Victor 04B.
I'll
The
second.
motion is- Thank you, Laura. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Opposed? Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. The next item is the Board of Directors Operations and Activities. I'm going to start with Jim. Okay with that?
This month I have nothing to report.
Okay. How about Laura?
Yes, I attended the ACCT conference in New York with Joe and Alicia and Lori. It was a great event, and I've got some info that I'll share with folks. And then I also attended the Feast at the Old Mill on the 18th of October, which was a lovely event. And I just wanted to share with everybody one thing that was very cool that I got to experience, which was I went to college night at Crook County High School with my youngest daughter. And we're college shopping. And we had the opportunity to visit with the COCC folks, which was fantastic. But then a little later in the night, we went over and talked to the OSU folks, because that's one place my daughter is considering. And I was absolutely delighted that the recruiter from OSU Cascades, whom I did not know, I've never met the person, was chatting with my daughter and her friend, and specifically brought up to them how great the partnership is between COCC and OSU Cascades, and how if they were interested at all, it would benefit them quite a bit to save a fair bit of money and get some smaller classes if they started at COCC and then or duly enrolled and did 2 and 2. So I know we hear about this, but it was pretty cool to experience it firsthand. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Laura. Erica?
I attended the Feast at the Old Mill also, and it was such a great event. And it was my first time that I was actually able to make it, and it didn't let me down. The student who spoke did a great job and told a great story, and the food was wonderful and the company was wonderful. And thank you to Zach and his team that put that on.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe?
Likewise, I attended the ACCT conference. It was a great event. It was refreshing. And likewise, I have information that I have not been able to collate because last 2 weeks been a Zoom. So I'll get it to everybody next week, next month.
Thank you for taking that trip, Brett. Alan?
Well, I've been vacationing, so if I can remember, I was at the Redmond listening session and a college affairs meeting.
Great. I just under the wire, just prior to tonight's board meeting, I had an opportunity to be part of the dedication ceremony of the new Middleton Science Center, named in honor of former President Jim Middleton. And great event, fun unveiling, and good to see a lot of former presidents and people that are good friends of the Middletons and just real champions of the college over the years. So that was it. Next item is the president's report. Dr. Chesson?
So I know in my periodic updates to the board, I talked about the fact that I was on the steering committee with 3 of the public university presidents in the state and 2 other community college presidents in the state to undertake a study of the landscape of higher education in Oregon. And this was jointly commissioned by the community colleges and the public universities. And in case you're curious, NCHEM is the consultant. It stands for National Center for Higher Education Management Systems. They're the consultants. Think of it as the higher ed landscape study. And we just guided that process in terms of the information gathering, the data that we asked them to look for. Alan, I know you came to one of the sessions that they had across the state, listening to various stakeholders' input about the state of higher ed. This resulted in about a 100-page report. And if you want to see that entire report, I'm happy to give it to you. But I opted for the 3-page executive summary. And I'll just hit, I know you can read this yourself, I'll just hit a couple of the high points. There is a large focus on how well higher ed is funded by the state in Oregon. And the report definitely calls out the dependence, the heavy dependence of our public institutions on either increasing enrollment or tuition rates or both. So we're very heavily dependent compared to some other states on tuition. Another important point to note is that this is highly problematic because of demographic changes that are really working against us. As the summary notes, our population is aging, and the number of graduates from high schools is projected to remain essentially the same over the next 15 years. So that necessitates a focus on strategies to meet the needs of adult learners. And as you know from our discussions, that's a huge population for us and will probably become even more so. And adult learners often don't have access to or aren't eligible for the kinds of federal financial aid that age students are. And often their lives are more complex and they have more things going on. And so the report encourages the state and the colleges to pay greater attention to the financial needs of adult learners. And I would just note that in my experience in Grand Rapids and here, a lot of the most successful kinds of adult training programs, short-term, are ones that pay the student to be a part of the program. And that if they successfully attend and complete, they're guaranteed a job afterwards. And so we've done that with Fortis Construction, with Meta in Prineville. I've seen it done in other cases, but that's, if you would have asked me as a much younger woman what I thought about paying people to go to school, I would have said, egad, that sounds scandalous. The reality of people's lives are that we need to think creatively, because people with families who need to continue to support those families can't just pick up and decide that they're going to quit their job and retrain or get another credential. There's also a major point that we need to focus more on the technology-based economy rather than on traditional kinds of economic and manufacturing models that we have. Hitting the high points. Focus on more targeted investment by the state, more clear coordinated strategy by the state. The challenge to public institutions more than to the state was to focus on how we can collaborate better, potentially share services, and so on. So, this is a report that is going to be used most definitely by the institutions, by OCCA as part of our legislative advocacy in the upcoming session to advocate for funding. I think there's also something that individual colleges, as they work with particular funders, are going to be looking for. And I think there are also finally quite a number of recommendations, perhaps not clear recommendations, but recommendations that the HEC could play a more forceful coordinating role in the state in terms of developing strategy and policy, and a more strategic role. Although I will say that opinion from the college presidents overall varies widely as to what role HEC should play and how much actual decision-making authority they should or shouldn't have. So this has been an interesting exercise. Personally, don't disagree with any of the findings. It's a fascinating process to watch wildly different institutions across the state try to come to consensus agreements on recommendations, and the consultants really kind of had to be magicians here. So it was an interesting experience. Again, ask a different president somewhere across the state and you'll get some things that they wish were in this report. Well, this is what it is, and I obviously can't disagree with the findings. And again, these folks bring not only perspective of having traveled across the state and spoken with many stakeholders, they know how other state systems work. They've seen what works elsewhere. They've seen what could be. And so they bring that specific knowledge as well. And again, if you'd like to read more specifics in over 100 pages for fun, let me know and I'll send you the whole report.
I would, and those consultants, yeah, they were mature and had lots of experience, so, they probably knew. What did they say about internet access?
They talk about that as an issue, definitely, internet access across the state. Nothing more
We just
necessarily.
need more, and it's a challenge.
It needs to be better.
Okay.
Gloria, I might be interested in that. I'm curious if the 100-page report has any more like tables and graphs and pictures, because 3 straight pages of executive summary of nothing but text is like,
Oh, man.
That's not gonna
hold
work.
on, I love that.
okay. Great.
Absolutely. And there are more specific suggestions,
Great.
specific possibilities for how funding models might change. So I'll send it to everybody if you're
Great. Thank
interested.
you. Appreciate that. Next item on our agenda is some dates to keeping in mind. Our next board meeting is going to be on Wednesday, December 14th. Again, back in the regular place at 5:45. And then the final thing, at this point, we are going to adjourn to executive session. So the COCC Board of Directors will now meet in executive session for the purpose of ORS 192.660, Section 2, subsection D, labor negotiations. Representatives of the news media and designated staff and other persons shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room and the virtual portal. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. Thank you. Let's maybe take 2 minutes.